young men and women that you're with are pretty cool, aren't they? Isn't this a great group? You've already figured out that you're gonna learn as much from each other as from all the presentations put together, because it's an extraordinary group. Secondly, you've already figured out that you happen to be here in this city, not only for a presidential inauguration, but for one of the most remarkable and extraordinary few days in all of American history. That's pretty neat. I want you to soak it in. I want you to feel it. You'll remember it the rest of your lives. You already have figured that out too. But you go through a lot of things where people will tell you, you'll remember this for the rest of your lives. So maybe that wears out a little bit over time. But this is one of those times when you should really seize this opportunity to make it more for you personally than just a learning experience. And learning experiences are incredibly important. But you know, a lot of people who will say there's a difference in learning with the head and learning with the heart. And maybe that sounds corny to some of you, but as you get older, you'll see and learn and feel what that really is all about. When I was the age of many of you here in this room, and I know there are two sort of distinctive groups here. There's some middle school students and there's some college students. I was sort of in between those two age groups when I went through an experience in 1961, in January 1961, when President John F. Kennedy was inaugurated, and it was quite a moment, because, and it has some things in common with this experience you're about to go through, in that a new generation was coming into leadership positions. It was a transfer of power. The torch was passed, in President Kennedy's famous phrase. But that event was so inspiring to me. It really was. And this is like that, and it's more as well, because it is a rite of passage for our country. What happened in the last election, and none of what I'm going to tell you is intended to be partisan in any way, but what happened in the last election all the way through to tomorrow has been an incredible transforming period of change for our country. I remember the day after the election in November, gosh, there were so many things that were moving to me, and I'm sure you felt some of these same things. But I used to be in politics, and I paid particular attention to one thing that I saw over and over again. Republicans who had campaigned against Barack Obama were interviewed, and they were saying, time after time, they would say, I'm so proud of my country. I'm so proud of my country. And what they didn't mean was that they had suddenly changed their opinions on all the issues that had caused them to support a good man, John McCain. They didn't suddenly switch parties or anything like that. But they recognized and understood the will of the majority in that election. And then they recognized that that decision meant something great, that went way beyond the issues and the political disputes. And I don't want to dwell overly on the race aspect of this, but you know, in the history of our country, wow, race was, in the phrase of some historians, slavery was America's original sin, and the Civil War, our latest conflict. You know all of these things, but to put it in perspective, I saw a public opinion poll conducted of African Americans, and something like 87% said, I never thought I would see this happen in my lifetime. And again, I don't want to dwell on this, But here's the thing. We proved as a country that we have grown to the point where we can pick who the majority of the voters believe is the best person to be president, regardless of any of these old distinctions in the past. That's pretty critical. But there's so much more involved. Because just as that time when President Kennedy took office, we're seeing a new generation come to power. And you know, the young people of that time helped to power that movement for change back in the 1960s. I grew up a lot of my life in the South, and I remember seeing the television news coverage of the civil rights demonstrations and the sit-ins at the lunch counters, and you all are too young to remember this. You've seen newsreels, you've studied history. But I want you to know what it was like for a kid your age during those times. We kids, I'm so old now. I was in a restaurant recently, and a woman in her 70s walked past my table just staring at me. And I didn't think much about it, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw the same woman coming from the opposite direction. She was just staring at me. And so I looked up and I said, "Hello, how are you?" And she said, "You know, if you dyed your hair black, you would look just like Al Gore." So I said, "Thank you, ma'am." And she said, "You sound like him too." But I'm thinking back now a long way to when I was your age and the Civil Rights Revolution was unfolding. And we kids asked our parents and their generation, explain to me again why it's okay for the law to officially discriminate against people because of their skin color. And parents try to tell their kids the right thing, you know. Usually, I do. And when our parents' generation couldn't answer that question, that's when the laws started to change. There are some things about our world that you know that older people don't know. Why would that be? Well, in a period of rapid change, the old assumptions sometimes just don't work anymore because they're out of date. New knowledge, new understandings are much more widely available sometimes to young people who are in school who aren't weighed down with the old flawed assumptions of the past. Now, don't get me wrong, your parents and your elders, as you already have figured out, know a lot that you can gain from. But in a period of rapid change, there are times when new understandings are more apparent to young people. This year, 2009, is an anniversary of something else. It's the 400th anniversary of the year when Galileo first perfected the telescope and pointed it toward Jupiter and Mars and Venus, and he was able to prove that actually what the older people of that time thought, namely that the sun revolved around the Earth and the Earth's the center of the solar system, he said, "No, I'm afraid not, because I can show you now with these measurements, and it's the other way around. The Earth goes around the sun." It was, if you'll forgive the phrase, an inconvenient truth. And he was imprisoned because he claimed this. But over time, young people could look at the math, they could look at the facts, and they say, yeah, hello. And a lot of times changes in understanding take place when the old assumptions fall away. I'm going to talk to you very briefly about the three biggest crises that our country is facing right now, that the new president, Barack Obama, tomorrow, just after high noon, will talk about in his speech. And then he'll go down to the White House and start acting to do something about it. And the old assumptions about the situation our country is facing right now are no longer valid, some of them. But first of all, before I talk about these crises and about the challenges that we face, I want to talk just a minute about you and this experience. I started by talking about what a great opportunity it is for you to talk with one another, but I want to talk about what a great opportunity it is for each of you personally.